Welcome to African Development Podcast, your go-to source for premium conversations on various aspects of Africa's development, from peace and security to trade, migration, climate change, and innovation.
I like to call myself as Canadian African rather than Canadian Ghanaian or anything, because my African identity is extremely important to me.
Prof, recently you granted this interview to the Reporter magazine, during which you said that the 3 candidates for the upcoming AU Commission Chairpersonship elections couldn't properly answer the key question of Pan-Africanism. Now, I wanted to know your thoughts on this, because you said this might be because they do not believe in Pan-Africanist aspirations. Why do you think is a belief in the ideas of Pan-Africanism relevant in who becomes the leader of the AU Commission, especially because some Africans are of the belief that the concept of Pan-Africanism itself is outdated and belongs in the past?
The concept of Pan-Africanism is as relevant as anything. I think there's also a myth about what the concept of Pan-Africanism is. So let me try to explain it. If you want to be a chairperson of the African Union and you don't believe in the concept of African unity, you don't believe in solidarity, you don't believe that the continent should be self-determined or should be self-sufficient, and you don't believe that working together for the common good of the African continent is the greatest thing that you can do, you will fail. So I have news for those who want to be there. In other words, if you don't believe in Team Africa, you cannot be successful if you are chairperson of the African Union. In other words, Pan-Africanism simply says, if you want to travel fast, go it alone as Ghana, Kenya, or Nigeria. But if you want to travel far, you go together as Africans. That's all Pan-Africanism is. And if you don't believe in that concept, and you believe in Team Kenya, Team Djibouti, or Team Madagascar, and you come there with that mindset, you will be exposed. Your disbelief in that and your attempt to promote something that you don't believe in would expose you. And that is a more reason why you have to believe in that concept. Number 2, if you don't believe in it, you are going to be managing about close to 1,700 diplomats. Many of them are very smart, and they're trained to read the body language, to read people. They would find out that you don't believe in it. Then what becomes of you is that your message get lost. And what happen is that everyone, it will be each one for himself, God for us all. And then they will just be looking for money rather than pursuing the interests of the continent of Africa. And that is, we've seen it time and time again. So if you don't believe in it, you can't get people to follow you. And your work will not be implemented. Last point is that I sometimes find it so difficult when I hear people that Pan-Africanism belongs to the past. Why is it? It's not even an old concept. If we think ideologies such as capitalism, ideologies such as communism, ideologies such as liberalism, that emerged 300 years before Pan-Africanism, is not old. Why is Pan-Africanism that old? It's not. It's so relevant, particularly in this modern world, that you cannot do it by yourself. You need to work as a team. If you don't believe in a teamwork, in any endeavor, you cannot be successful. Medicine, engineering, anywhere else. One important criteria is teamwork. And Pan-Africanism is saying that we should do a teamwork. Whatever we do as Africans, we should go as the team. So Team Africa is the most important thing. If you don't believe in Team Africa, you cannot be successful as the chairperson of the African Union.
Interesting, very good. Now, you also argued that the most important role of the chairperson of the AU Commission is not their substantive power, rather their symbolic power. And therefore, they should be in the capitals of the member states of the AU, promoting AU policies and pushing the member states to implement these policies. Who among these three candidates now, that are vying for the position of the AUC chairmanship, think, fits this picture of the ideal chairperson of the AU Commission?
The person who fits the bill of the AU chairperson, I'm going to outline in a broad stroke the most important criteria. And I think member states will know who among the candidates is best fit for this. Number one is that you need someone who has got a great absorption capacity, ability to absorb briefings. We have a lot of people who don't often have the capacity to be able to understand and to absorb the briefing that are given to them by the advisors, by their subordinate. So the last person who will leave their office is the information that the person gave it to them is the one that they will remember. When you don't have a briefing capacity, it's so difficult for you to manage the African Union because there's a lot of information that you'll be exposed to. And you should be able to distill it and identify the best information you need to carry it forward. So you need that, number one. Number two, you need someone who has got a lot of energy. Right? A lot of long meetings, long traveling, and in most cases, you have a very short period of time for sleep or for rest. If you don't have that energy, you're going to struggle. Principle, you have to be a quick thinker. You have to think on your feet, and you have to be a quick thinker because you're going to be in a meeting with European leaders, American leaders, and leaders who are well prepared anytime they are coming to a meeting. If you are not thinking on your feet, you would be exposed. And the last one, and this perhaps is the most important, you have to be very principled. AU is people call it a jungle. If you are not principled, you get dragged into areas that you don't want to go to. There will be a lot of phone calls from president, give this job to this individual, send this money here, do that over here. If you are not principled, you get yourself into difficulty. And we've had leaders, I'm not saying that we've had chairpersons who are not the most principled, but across the African continent, the challenge we have is that we've had leaders who are not principled enough. And that's why we've had difficulty in terms of managing the continent.
Very good. Now we have three candidates, as you're aware, who have spoken at the Mujadala Africa debates in December. Who do you think among these candidates fits this picture that you painted of an ideal chairpersonship of the Commission?
I didn't want to specifically mention names, but my sense is that I think if you look at the debate carefully, it looks like the Djibouti candidate is perhaps the most well-informed about the AU issues and knows the key issues and the things not to get involved. It looks to me, at least based on the debate, at least watching from afar, it looks to be the one who is well put together. The Kenyan candidate has experience on the side. He comes with a lot of gravitas, and in some cases, he's much more connected to African leaders. So there's often a tendency to gravitate towards that particular. So among those, I thought that the two candidates, those two, but if you push me, my sense is that at least based on the debate, the Djibouti candidate looks to be the most informed on that stage.
Very good. And then we also argued in that same interview that national governments only implement policies of international organizations such as the AU when civil society mobilize domestic constituencies to push them to do it. Since as it is now, a large percentage of the AU policies since its inception in 2002 have not been ratified and implemented. What must the next chairperson of the AU do to ensure that these pending decisions, protocols, and charters have been implemented and ratified by member states?
Number one, spend a lot of time in member states. Don't spend a lot of time trying to micromanage the African Union. good leaders are often the one who are good delegators. The deputy chairperson should be the one running the house of the African Union. So spend more time on the in member state. When you also go to member state, don't spend most of your time with president and leaders. Spend most of your time mobilizing domestic constituencies such as student groups, trade unions, civil society groups, parliaments. Those are the constituencies or groups that are going to put pressure on leaders who have got competing pressures on them to be able to put African or African Union issues on at the top of the agenda so that it would be implemented. So I will repeat, domestic mobilization, mobilize domestic groups, let ordinary Africans, organized Africans know about the work, the good work of the African Union and how important these protocols are and or decisions are for them. Let them know the value of it, and they will be the champion of it.
You also criticized those calling for the reform of the AU, which you describe as one of the world's most well-designed institutions. In this case, what do you make of the ongoing reforms of the AU that was earlier led by President Paul Kagame and now President William Ruto? Do you think these reforms are necessary, or you think we just need, like you said, an ideal chairperson for the AU Commission to move the AU forward and make it work for Africans?
These reforms, every organization, you have to go through reforms, right? You have to renew yourself. The challenge with the African Union is that since it was created, it has never been allowed to work. It has been in the reform mode since it was created. Let me give you just a broad outline of these, what I mean by that. Soon as it was created, by the time they got to Addis Ababa, Mr. Gaddafi felt that the decision that was made didn't go far enough, and therefore introduced an amendment even before the Constitutive Act was ratified. Right? Then remember, so this is 2001. Then 2000, so we started the discussion about reforms. If you remember, all the way leading to the Accra debate in 2006. That was talking about reforming an organization that has just been created. Then that led to another form of reform all the way to 2009, where we had the famous Nigerian Adedeje's report, 2009. That consumed the work of the African Union all the way until 2012. And then 2016, we come in with another reforms. When are we going to allow the organization to work? So that's the number one. Number two, reforms have the tendency to bring the African Union to a standstill. Anyone who has watched the African Union, Mr. Faki's administration would have achieved so much had it not been the reforms. Because what happens, it created so much insecurity among staff. People did not know whether they are going to be sacked or they are going to be there. So everyone was just looking for the next step, right? And it has a way of also sometimes creating divisions among the AU team. Right? And I'll give you specific, I think this is something that we have to watch. Kagame report created so much division between, at that time, as soon as Mr. Faki and his deputy were selected. Both of them wonderful individuals. They got along so well at the beginning, but the reforms created so much division between those two individuals, because one, the deputy is come from a very deliberative culture. He wants everyone's voice to be heard. He wants the staff voice to be heard. Mr. Faki comes from a different culture, who feels that we have to make decisive decision, and then the staff would follow. And that created a division. And for 4 years, that division between the two at the top undermined the work of the African Union and divided the commission.
You mean between Kwasi Tieku and Musa Faki, right?
And I mean Musa Faki. That division, that fight between them, undermined the organization for a long time. And these are wonderful two human beings who would have achieved so much if they were united, but because of the reforms, right? So for me, the talk of reform and in any case, has actually not made the African Union any better. If anything at all, it has actually made the African Union worse off, both institutionally as well as in terms of organizational structure. So what is it? And we've wasted so much money, energy, and in some cases, wasted the time of so many people. In the end, the organization is actually worse off than it was. So for me, we should put the reform aside and let the organization work in any case. And this is the most important point.
Yes, very good.
The problem of the African Union is a problem of member states. We would not need the African Union if our countries or governments are working really well. The African Union is there because we have governments that are not working well. We have sometimes government run by people with failed state mentality. We have sometimes, and that's why we need the African Union. So the structures that are there, really well designed, based on lessons that we learned from the UN system, from the OAU system, and then from other systems that has been put together. Somehow people come with a very simplistic mindset and they think they want to change it to mimic that of the UN when we know that the UN structures are not the most efficient. Or they want to change it to mimic the European Union when we know that those areas that you want to mimic is not the most efficient part of the European Union. This is a well-designed. If we have any problem, it's a problem of member state and the people that we give position to. The structures, there's nothing wrong with the structures. It's a well-designed structure. It is one of the innovative and Africa's contribution to the global system. We should do a very archaic model. And I think that's what the reform has done. Reform has not helped Africa at all. It's set us backwards. And any chairperson who comes in and wants to talk about reforms might sense that he's going to spend the next 4 years not getting anything done. And that's part of the reason why, if you look at Mr. Faki himself said that during his tenure, almost 90% of decisions that have been made have not been implemented because their mind is on reforms, trying to make the reform, those who are pushing for the reforms, happy. And in the end, you leave aside the most important thing, which is convincing member states to implement decisions that have been made.
Exactly, very good. Now, despite Africa's huge population, its countries constituting a huge bloc in the UN system, over around 55 member states, it seems Africa is not well represented in the global and UN system, including on the Security Council of the UN. How important do you think is the role of the AUC chairperson in presenting Africa's case in such global forums and making the continent a force to reckon with in international affairs?
Extremely important, because most of any successes that we have achieved as Africans in the international system has been because we have organized ourselves and we've gone into it with the mindset for Team Africa. Think about it, the success we have in terms of election into high position in the international system. At the moment, African is the one who is the head of the WTO. African is the one who is the head of the World Health Organization. We've had those successes, and at the moment, even if you look at the agenda of the UN Security Council, Africa dominates the agenda of the UN. Not because we are because we are troublemakers, but because we have the chairperson of the African Union in the past and other people mobilizing the continent of Africa to take a common position on some of these things, or to support a single slate of candidates, or in some cases to support a common agenda. Anytime we've gone with Team Africa, led by the chairperson, we tend to win against the other continent. Right? Because when we are organized, and the chairperson is so important in terms of mobilizing Africans or mobilizing member states to think about Team Africa rather than think about Team Kenya, Team Ghana, and so on and so forth. So the chairperson's role is extremely important. Having someone who can nudge, cajole, persuade our leaders to think about the broader interests of Africa rather than the interests of their country is going to be so important. And that's why I think having a chairperson who knows what they are doing, is organized, is sharp, It knows the files, can absorb briefings, and it has also a lot of energy, is going to be helpful for us, particularly within the context that we live in. If you watch carefully, the international system is going through a fundamental shift from the liberal international order that was created after the Second World War. A new international order is being built or is going to be created. You need a chairperson who is clued in, who knows the issues, and who knows Africa's interests and can articulate it in the best way possible.
Very good. And then finally, there's this perception that the AU's agenda is heavily influenced by donor countries who fund its program and operation budgets. However, research and scientific data show there is no correlation, let alone, in your own words, causation between external funding and decision-making at the AU. Does that mean who funds the AU is inconsequential to its Pan-Africanist agenda?
My sense is that who funds it is not necessarily it's not very consequential. What is actually consequential is making sure that we have the right people at right places. When you don't have the right people at right places, the tendency is just to emulate, copy. So if there has been any influence often on the African Union, is because sometimes people don't feel so confident in their own ability, and therefore they go to places like the AU Union to copy what. But if you are confident in themselves, capable, and able to do their own work, in most cases, it's not consequential. In some cases, too, if you have people who are in the right places and they are the right people in those right places, you can also challenge and be able to discern good ideas from bad ideas. Even when you are copying, you'll be much more reflective and know that this will work on the African context, this won't work. You would also be able to even challenge the donors. And remember that most of these donors, if you go with good ideas, they will buy those good ideas, right? So I think the problem for us is we have to work on ourselves, making sure that we appoint the right people. And this is why the ongoing attempt to the ongoing evaluation of the staff of the commission is very, very important, because the study that has been done suggests that almost 60% of staff are in the wrong places. So moving them to those right places is going to be so important going forward, rather than talking about external funding. In any case, whether we like it or not, donors or external players are always going to try to influence, whether they give us money or they don't give us money. So the question is not about the money that they give to us. The question is about us realizing that they are always going to try to influence. So the question is to position yourself in such a way that you know exactly what you want from them in their interaction. It's not a question of rejecting their money. Even if you reject it, they're still going to find a way to influence it. So the money itself is not the problem. It is us, working Africans or those who work for the African Union, knowing what they want, making sure that everything that they are doing with the greatest interest of the African continent, and making sure that every idea that they want to pursue is an idea that is fit for purpose, as an idea that is suitable to the African continent, because some ideas that have worked so well in different parts of the world may not necessarily work within the African context. And we should not also be these nativists, and sometimes defensive, that any idea that comes from somewhere, somehow we want to reject it. That is not the right mindset. The good mindset is to be open-minded, but then make sure that you don't want to be Uncle Tom, that every idea that comes from someone else, you want to be someone else, or you want to be someone else, not yourself. We have to try to be ourselves and make sure that the ideas that we implement are ideas that are very suitable for the continent of Africa. That will work. I think that's the most important. That's the most consequential. That's the most important, rather than external funding.
Thank you for listening to this episode of African Development Podcast. We hope you found it enlightening and innovative. Keep a tab on our social media pages for more exciting episodes.